Alright, I don't want to hear any conversation about how I wear the same 4 shirts in every video. I'm sensitive. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. If this isn't a welcome back, let me introduce myself. My name's Chris. I know how to read. And I also printed out this little guy. I 3D printed this little spray paint can guy, and I think I was able to make him talk. So if we could zoom into the camera right here. Allegedly. And today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in March. And while I think March was probably pretty average in terms of pages read, when it comes to books read, I think I only read 4 books, 3 of them being physical and 1 of them being an audiobook. But in terms of like amount of bangers in a month, I feel like March is already up there and like one of the best months of reading I've ever had. Make sure you get your drinks and your snacks ready. Like I said, not a ton of books being read this month, so this shouldn't be the longest video ever, but still, you're watching a YouTube video. It's a Monday morning. Y'all might have work or school. Just relax, chill out. I'm gonna be talking about some books. Y'all are gonna be listening, maybe watching even. Just have a chill time. Before we get to all the many positives, I'm looking at my phone right now because that's where I have my notes. We are going to start off with the negatives. And right now, that is the one book that I DNF'd in March, which was Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobsen. This book is essentially like a realistic, pretty well thought out, I would argue, thought experiment on what would happen if North Korea launched a nuke that hit the United States. And just based off of that, I thought I would be a lot more interested in this book than I actually ended up being. I think I really only got like 2 or 2.5 hours into the audiobook, which is maybe 9 or 10 hours long, before I decided to DNF it. And I don't even think it's the fault of the book entirely. I just had so many more things, like the books that we're going to get to, I had so many more things that I wanted to read or that I wanted to listen to, much more than I wanted to read or listen to this book. And while I understand that something like this obviously has to be very thought out and there needs to be a lot of research and a lot of interviews and things like that, I don't really think you needed like a however long audiobook. I'll put the time up right here. I don't think you ever needed an audiobook that's like this long to kind of prove your point. I do think this book would have made an absolutely killer 20-minute YouTube video. Like, I really think you could have shortened this down to like the very like important pieces, if that makes sense. And like I said, I did not even get through a quarter of this audiobook or a third of this audiobook. So I don't know if it gets any better than the few hours that I did listen to it, but it is the only book that I DNF'd and that I did not finish this month. And from a book that I DNF'd, we went to probably one of the longest books that I've ever read, which was Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I spent a whole video talking about this book, so if you haven't seen my Brave New Role video, something should be popping up, I think, on one of these sides of the screen if you want to watch that. It's one of my favorite videos ever, and it's like a concept that I'm going to be bringing back to this channel in April, so I hope y'all like that. But if you haven't seen it, click on something that should be on screen right now in order to go watch. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this book because that was like a 50-minute video, but let's go over some like key points. Our main character is an ex-student named Rodion Raskolnikov, who within the first 100 pages of this book murders a pawnbroker and her sister, and then he spends the next 600 pages coming to terms with like the physical, mental, and emotional toll that these murders that he's committed have on him, and how the death of these 2 women affects the environment around him as well. I really like this book. It is like a classic in every sense of the word, and while I don't think reading it in the way that I read it was like the best avenue, where I went from reading like 20 pages a day to reading 200 pages in a day, I really do think that in terms of like my writing style, or reading style, excuse me, I think if I read this like maybe 50 to 70 page chunks a day for a few weeks, I think I could have gotten a lot more out of this book. But I read it for a video, and the video was really cool. So I think overall, I still liked the reading process. I really do feel like Raskolnikov is like a therapist's worst nightmare, right? Because even before he commits the murders, and even after he commits the murders, he's going through this like really warped sense of introspection where he's like trying to figure out, should I do this? Is this the right thing to do? And then 4 pages later, he's like, this is definitely the right thing to do. I'm the stupidest person on the planet for even considering that this wasn't the right thing to do. And after the murders, his body is like physically, like this man faints more than any other person on the planet. He is like he becomes sickly very quickly, very early on after committing these murders. It's like his body is rejecting the fact that he even did this bad thing. And even mentally too, like he goes through this anguish throughout the entire 700-page book where he's like so disgusted with himself for doing something. And then again, 4 pages later, he's like, I'm the greatest person on the planet because I did this thing. I got rid of this bad person. It's such a crazy back and forth. And what Dostoevsky is able to do within like those 4-page or those 12-page flips, I'm just making up numbers, but between this like bipolarness that we see in Raskolnikov, you're able as a reader to be like, I kind of get where my boy Rodion is coming from. I kind of get where he's coming from. And as interesting as the lead up to the murders was, and even the little bit of time after the murders, for me personally, I think it was the second half of this book that really sold it for me. Have I not had my glasses on this entire video? Hold on. We're so back, chat. I think the conversations by our main character and also by the side characters that Raskolnikov talks to about like crime and morality and psychology and freedom or lack thereof, the very concept of like guilt, were so interesting and so informative really, that while they might not have been like incredibly necessary, however you want to deem necessary, to the actual plot to Raskolnikov's story, I think it was incredibly interesting and knowledgeable and informative to read about. So while you're not only kind of going on this journey with Raskolnikov as he comes to his version of terms with what he did, you're also going on a journey with Dostoevsky as he's talking about this very like convoluted, not straightforward at all, very difficult to talk about subjects like crime, like religion, like the very status or the morality of government. And you're able to have, or at least Dostoevsky's able to have, these very like nuanced conversations that as a reader, like I really enjoyed. And like I mentioned earlier, if you really want to hear my thoughts on the book, like as I was reading it, you can watch the Brave New World video, but this is a 5-star book if there ever was one. Like I think reading this book has made me so excited to read more Dostoevsky. Like, I don't know where it is, but I have, where are you? I don't know where it is, but I have the Brothers Karamazov somewhere in my vicinity, in my collection of books, and I, like, reading Crime and Punishment has made me so excited to read that, because I've only heard good things about Brothers Karamazov, and now that I've kind of gotten an understanding as to Dostoevsky and how he writes and how he talks, I only expect very good things from Brothers Karamazov. So that was the first book that I finished reading in March, Crime and Punishment, 5 stars. The next book I read this month was Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, a book that was on the TBR for such a long time, I almost forgot about it, but we finally did it in March 2025. I also read this book for a video, so if you want to see me reading this book, I did a video where I kind of did like a very kind of realistic and practical week of reading in my life, so something should be popping up on screen right now if you want to watch that. In this book, you are following our main character, Cyrus Shams, as he is trying to find kind of a meaning for his life, and he becomes obsessed with martyrdom and finding meaning in his death and having his death mean something to the people around him once he's gone. This is also probably the only book where I'm going to get into like pretty heavy spoilers because I can't discuss my problems with this book without discussing spoilers, so there is going to be something that pops up on screen when I am talking spoiler things. But first, we're going to do kind of a non-spoiler-ish wrap-up, right? So we're following Cyrus as he becomes to fall in love with the idea of martyrs and martyrdom, right? Like dying with meaning or with purpose. This leads him to New York City with his best friend Z as they go to a Brooklyn art museum because they find out that there is this woman who is in her dying days and she wants to have conversations with people about dying and about death. And when Cyrus hears about this, he says, man, this would be perfect for my book. And while he's talking to this woman named Orchidea, and even before he was talking to her, he was kind of dreading the questions that he would ask her or what they would talk about. And I would argue that Cyrus's entire journey in this book is about questioning, right? It's about questioning his worthiness, his life, his death, what everything means to him, and also what he means to his environment. He keeps a really small circle. He only has like 2 friends that we really hear about. He has his sponsor, because he's a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And then he also has a dead mom who died when he was like a baby, and his father died right before he went to college, or right when he got accepted into college, So he really keeps like a pretty small circle, all things considered. And I love the writing of this book so much. Like, Kaveh Akbar shot up the like my non-existent list of favorite authors. Kaveh Akbar is like near the top. The way he's able to build these characters, the way he's able to build kind of this entire conversation there is in the entire book about death and about life, what makes life worth living and what makes a death what makes a death have meaning. I don't like thinking about my own death, and I don't like talking about it, but I think the conversations that Akbar was able to start, like in my own mind, like conversations I could have with myself, were like in the very smallest bit, I don't want to like put too much importance or emphasis on this book, were like a little bit life-changing. Just a little bit. But the end of Cyrus's journey in this book is where I have a problem and where we're going to be talking about spoilers. So, spoiler thing right here, editing Chris. Long story short, towards the like middle, maybe 2/3 of the book, we find out that this dying artist, Orchidea, is actually Cyrus's mother, who he thought had passed away after she was flying to Iran to visit her brother, and the US military shot her plane down. That didn't happen. His mother is alive, and she became an artist in New York City. Cyrus only finds this out after Orchidea passes away, after his mother passes away, and it's an incredibly tragic part in the story. And through the journey that Cyrus has been on up to this point, and through the journey that he goes on once he starts getting some answers to like his mother's history and what happened, his kind of obsession with martyrdom kind of reaches, I wouldn't say like an end point or a stopping point, but it reaches like a pause in his life. And Akbar chooses to show this kind of pause in his obsession, or an ending with his obsession, in this like hallucinogenic, dream-like state. He's in like a park in New York City with Z. They're sitting on a park bench, and the environment around them is changing in a bunch of like dreamy, trippy ways. There's a bunch of horses and imagery that's mentioned in the beginning of the book that's brought back now in the end of the book. And there's sort of just like a general dream-like kind of psychedelic aspect to the ending of this novel. Like the last 10 pages are in this weird dream-like state. And this sort of like ambiguous ending towards the book leads the readers to have like a bunch of different ideas on what actually happened at the end of this book, right? Some people think that this dream-like state is to symbolize Cyrus's death, that he died shortly after learning about his mother's death, that he relapsed back into drugs and alcohol. Some people think that the ending of this book is like a symbolic thing to show that Cyrus's obsession, that Cyrus's journey with martyrdom has changed or has ended, and it is like a stepping stone into a new part of his life, a new like different life that he has to live now that he's gotten some answers to the questions that he's had for a majority of his life up to this point. And I also thought that this kind of dream-like trance that happens at the end of the book could also be like a meta-analysis of the journey that Cyrus had been on up to this point, and the journey that he's going to be going on for the rest of his life. And as a reader, this kind of psychedelic sequence is kind of the representation that we're seeing of the ending of one journey and the beginning of another, if that makes sense. Like, I'm kind of talking with you guys about my opinions on this book, but I'm also trying to figure out how I feel about it, like, at the same time. I feel that not having more concreteness to the ending of this part of Cyrus's life, of Cyrus's story, kind of defeats the purpose of the journey that Cyrus has been on, you know, the other 320 out of the 330 pages of this book. He's looking for answers about his life, about martyrdom. He gets some of those answers by meeting his mother and by talking with Orchidea, and by ending the book on this, like, ambiguous, like, did it happen? Did it really happen? Is he dead? Is he alive? Sequence. I feel like it kind of reverts back to the beginning of the story, where you're with this like drug addict, alcoholic who like doesn't have any answers in his life. And I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, and I'm still like coming to terms with how I feel about this book personally and how I feel about this ending specifically. And maybe that's a journey that Kaveh Akbar wanted us to go on, right? Like, there are no guarantees in life. There is no reason you should have a happy ending. And I'm not even saying I wanted Cyrus to have a happy ending. I just wanted him to have a more concrete ending. I originally rated this book 5 stars. I put it on my Instagram. If y'all don't follow me on Instagram, you can follow me there. I don't post too much, but if you want to hook a brother up with some followers, I'd appreciate it. I originally rated this book 5 stars. I'm kind of going back to 4 stars because of how much I'm struggling with this ending. I can definitely see myself rereading this book in the next few months. It is about a little over 300 pages, if I remember correctly, but it doesn't even feel like that. I feel like if you have a free day or two and you want to knock out Martyr, like, you can definitely do that, and I don't feel feel like you're rushing through it or anything like that. Like, if you tried to rush through Crime and Punishment, you'd be rushing through a lot. Like, it would definitely feel like you're rushing. But if you have like a free day or two to read Martyr, like, I think that's the best way to experience this book. And I love this book so much, right? And I think even if I decide to give this book 4 stars and I love 98% of this book, this might still be one of my top 10 books of all time, because that 98% was such a banger that I don't want the ending to ruin how much I emphatically and like without doubt loved the majority of this book. Another banger, I was just looking at my notes, another banger of a book that I knew nothing about when I jumped into it is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harper. 5 stars. 5 stars off rip. This is like a dark, kind of post-apocalyptic, kind of dystopian novel where there are these 40 women that are imprisoned in a cage that are being monitored by guards, and that's really all you know for like a large portion of the beginning of this book. The difference between our main character, who's one of the 40 women, and the other 39 women is that there is such a large age gap between our main character and the other youngest woman that our main character doesn't know a life outside of her imprisonment, right? Like, these other women have like very vague recollections. They think they might have been drugged, so they don't remember exactly everything about their life before they were imprisoned. But our main character doesn't know anything. She is very young when she was brought into this cage, and she just knows the cage. She knows the 39 other women. She knows the guards. She knows like the scraps of food that she has been given, and that's all she has. This isn't a spoiler because it's going to be on like every blurb of this book that you're going to read if you ever decide on reading this. But eventually the women escape, right? They are able to get out of their imprisonment, and the rest of this book is just watching these 40 women try to survive in this like barren wasteland of like, maybe it's a different part of Earth, maybe it's a different planet. We're not really sure as the reader, and they're definitely not sure as the characters experiencing it. One of the main reasons I gave this book 5 stars is because it reminded me very much of something I hold very near and dear to my heart, which is one of my favorite video games of all time, which is Horizon Zero Dawn. Some of my fondest gaming memories are playing Horizon Zero Dawn, playing our main character Aloy, who is this young woman who has been like thrown into this life that she had no consent in being a part of. She has to follow these rules. She's essentially like some sort of outcast who is being imprisoned by the world around her, not like in an actual prison, but there are these rules and regulations and laws that she is forced to follow, and she wants more. She wants answers, and I loved playing this game and learning more about the lore and getting like history as to why certain laws were enacted or why Aloy's life was the way it was, and getting these little nuggets of information as you played, and like you learned more and more about the world, about the universe, and about the life that Aloy was forced to live. But I Who Have Never Known Men, and with our main character, it's almost the complete opposite of that in the best way possible. You don't get a ton of information as to why the women are in the predicament that they are in, what like world events led them to that environment, or why like there isn't anybody else. Like, you don't meet anybody else in this book besides the 40 women, and since our main character is the youngest of those 40 women, there is a point in which she is the only survivor left. But I was listening to the audiobook, and even when it was a bunch of characters, when it was a bunch of women, or when our main character was a little older and she was the only survivor, I was listening to this audiobook, I was engrossed, a word I don't think I've ever used before. I was listening to this audiobook jaw on the floor for a majority of like the second half of this book. I would say that the writing in this book is simple and basic, but I mean that in like the absolute best way possible. Like, I don't want to speak ill on the writing of this book because it really kind of matches the blandness and the boringness and like the monotony of the life that these 40 women, or these 39 women and our main character are experiencing for like the entirety of their lives, or at least a majority of it. And like her journey, her life, her survival in this weird like dystopian barren wasteland planet, like it could fill 17 more books, 6 seasons of a TV show, and a movie, and I would watch them all. It's that great of a story. But I think the blandness and the monotony of their everyday life led to some of the best moments in the book, right? I'm going to count this as a spoiler, but I don't really know if I would consider it that. But please read this book. It's very short. It's like $10 at Barnes & Noble. I don't even know if you can find a used copy. Get a used copy. But it's very good. But there is a point in this book where our main character is traveling by herself, and she finds a road. They've been in barren wastelands up to this point. She finds a road road. I'm at work, jaw on the floor, and I'm just like, she found a road. This is life-changing. The way that the author is able to write both like the monotony of everyday life and then going into like the smallest discovery of something new, like my heartbeat was rising. Like it felt like I was going on the same journey. This book is about love and what it means to be human and what it means to survive in a world where like everything has been chosen for you, and then the sudden rush of like giddiness, but also anxiety and just fear that can come from having like maybe one or two things that were previously chosen for you your entire life flipped on their head, or maybe you have to start making decisions for yourself. Like it is truly like the evolution of humanity in this one young woman's story from the beginning of her life to the eventual end of her life. It's being like republished or re-released now with a new cover, and one of my commenters actually said that, a longtime commenter on the channel, shout out to them, shout out to TJ, they said that there are actually better covers than this cover that's being re-released currently. So I kind of want to check that out because I definitely need to get my hands on a physical copy of this book ASAP. It is a very short read. You can definitely bust this out in a few hours if you have the chance. And like I want to get my own copy, and I think everyone should have their own copy as well. 5 stars if I haven't said it already for I Who Have Never Known Men. Last but certainly not least, we have this novel right here, You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro Enrique, translated by Natasha Wimmer. You are following a psychedelic retelling of the first time that the Spaniards met Moctezuma and the Aztec Empire, and kind of what happens in the day leading up to these two very powerful, very important groups meeting. The entirety of these 200 pages is the very day leading up to the eventual conversation between Hernan Cortez and the Spaniards and Moctezuma and his like royal kind of government and party of the Aztec Empire. And while we know in reality what happened is that the Aztec Empire got absolutely dog walked and the Spaniards took over, this book does something a little bit different, and it shows both perspectives of the story, but it shows them kind of in various stages of tripping absolute balls out of their mind. I think the word I would use to describe this reading experience is trippy, right? And I don't, no pun intended. Maybe it was maybe interesting is a better word, because I have never done mushrooms, but I would be lying if I said I didn't want to. But in this book, you are following people who are not on the same planet that we are on. And I think one of my favorite points in this book is towards the end of the book, where Moctezuma is off of his ass tripping on mushrooms, like quite literally in a different universe, to the point where one of his priests is showing him a box of something, and Moctezuma looks in the box and sees Alvaro Enrique writing this book. And there's like 5 or 6 moments like that in the book. It's crazy. It feels like you're on some sort of drug trip as you're reading this book, right? Because there's a lot of words you might not understand. There's a lot of terminology you might not understand. And one of the things I really appreciated is the book actually starts out with an email between the author of Alvaro Enrique and his translator, where he essentially tells her, hey, these are the rules that I'm going to be using when talking about these like native languages and these native people, and this is how I'm going to do certain spellings and things like that. A lot of the readers might have difficulty with how to pronounce certain words, or the fact that I don't provide like immediate definition to things. Chill out, bro. Context clues, you'll figure it out. And for whatever reason, I don't know like if you see that a lot in books, but I really appreciated that. Just the author being like, hey, even people who understand these native languages might not understand the way I'm using them. Just vibe with the book. Just enjoy yourself. Like, you'll get it. And that was one of my favorite points of reading this book, was like, there would be entire pages where I didn't even know what was going on. And then I'd get this little bit of information and I'd be like, oh, everything makes sense. And then we'd go back to not understanding stuff. And then I would get another nugget of information. And then everything would make sense. It was such a fun and cool, like, weird reading experience that I don't think I've ever experienced with a different type of book. And there were some times where it went a little over the top. Like, there were times where I think if I didn't have the physical book, it would be kind of annoying to have to go over like certain chapters. Some of the chapters in this book are like 1 or 2 pages long, but I would have to reread them because I didn't really know what was going on. This is one of those books that they don't use quotation marks where people are talking. So I feel like, is this someone talking? Is this just the author, you know, explaining an environment, explaining a scene? Did I really understand this conversation that just happened? And it was a lot, or maybe not a lot, but it was like, there were just like a noticeable amount of times where I had to go kind of back and forth to make make sure I was understanding what I was reading. But I think that's what I liked most about this book, right? Is this kind of weird journey where at some points you understand what's going on and sometimes you don't. I think if I knew more information about the actual meeting between the Aztecs and the Spaniards, this book might lose a little bit of like the glamour for me. Like, I liked kind of being out of the loop. I liked following this cast of characters throughout this day before this incredibly important meeting and just like becoming like part of the environment, and similar to what we did in I Who Have Never Known Men, just trying to get context clues, trying to figure out what's going on, the same way that the Spaniards are trying to figure out why they were just so like openly welcomed into the Aztec Empire, into like an enemy area, into this enemy city, and why the king is being so nice to them and so open and giving them gifts and things like that. Like, you're figuring stuff out with these characters, and Alvaro Enrique pulls no punches. Like, he does not give you a lot of information that the characters in this book don't know. You are figuring stuff out with them. And I think the character work that Enrique is able to do in this book is probably its strongest point. Like, Moctezuma as a character, even though he's on mushrooms, in some, like, in varying levels, I should say, this entire book, he is such a great character, and the depth we're able to get out of him, even though he's on mushrooms, for a majority of this book, is awesome. Even some of the captains that are with Hernan Cortez, and like some of the translators, both on the Aztec side and the Spaniard sides, are like characters that could have their own spin-off books and their own stories be told. Even though I speak very highly of this book, I am going to give it 4 stars. I think while the reading experience was trippy and it was fun and it was interesting, it did give me a little bit of anxiety, which I feel like is how I would feel if I actually did magic mushrooms. Having to flip back and forth like a noticeable amount of times, kind of, it didn't ruin the reading experience for me, but it definitely made it a little iffy. But I still, like I said, very much enjoyed the story, very much enjoyed the character work. I liked the ending of this book very much as well. And I think once I get through my TBR, I want to give this a reread just to see if there are any Easter eggs or like any bits of information that I missed in my first reread that might make the reading experience a little bit better for me. But 4 stars for You Dreamed of Empires. This was such a great and awesome and fun month of reading, and I feel like I say this every reading update, but April, this next month, is going to have so much more to live up to. Thank y'all for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you liked anything I said or anything I talked about, or you want to join the conversation on anything I said or talked about, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. There's a bunch of buttons to do that down below. You can do all that. My TBR has been hit after hit after hit so far, and my TBR jar has like 15 or 16 more books that we have to work our way through, and I only envision more 3 or 4 plus star books in my future. All right, I got to get out of here. I'm having birthday brunch with moms. I hope y'all do something that makes you happy. I hope you do something that makes you some money. I hope you got some good books, some good reading in your future. Make sure you subscribe so you can see more videos similar to this one, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.